Leena Klammer, later known as Esther, was born on April 20th, 1976 with a rare hormone disorder called hypopituitarism that prevented her from physically developing past the appearance of a 9-year-old. This is a real condition that affects the pituitary gland, the part of your brain that makes hormones like GH, the growth hormone, and FSH, which regulates the reproductive system and contributes to the production of estrogen. Estrogen is another reproductive hormone. In females, it's responsible for several functions, like the development of breasts, wider hips, all the good stuff basically. It can also affect the woman's mood. When estrogen levels get low, the result can be mood changes like irritability and depression. Is Leena's lack of estrogen production the reason that she becomes a complete murderous psychopath? Was her mood so badly affected that she could no longer experience things like empathy or distinguish between right and wrong? Probably not. For one, it looks like she was admitted to Saarne Institute, a psychiatric hospital, as early as January 8th, 1987, when she was just 11 years old. Estrogen may have some small effects on children, but for the most part, it's not really responsible for dictating mood until puberty. Plus, there are many different factors that can affect hormone levels, like age, diet, exercise, and medication. Estrogen levels are always changing, and you don't see most women just like randomly becoming serial killers for a minute when their hormones get out of whack. In my experience, most of them stop 1 or 2 steps short of that. Psychopathy is a complex psychological condition influenced by various factors, including genetic predisposition, upbringing, environmental factors, and neurological differences. This is all to say that while hypopituitarism probably isn't related to Leena becoming a psychopath, she definitely did become one. To learn about the backstory only hinted at to this point, how the character Leena Klammer was inspired by a real-life criminal case, and how she inspired another case whose effects are still being felt today, stick around to the end of this video. Thanks to Mistplay for sponsoring today's video. More on them later. Welcome to Horror History. Whoever made these boob sliders for The Sims 4 needs to be put on a list. Orphan is a 2009 horror film directed by Jaume Collet-Serra. This guy is an alumni of my college, and he's like the most successful guy who ever went through there, including me. They had posters of his movies all over the walls, so I got to walk past Leena's gaze every day, which was pretty cool. There was also a computer lab. The finished version of Orphan leaves the cause of the delusions and insanity in her adulthood open to interpretation and analysis, which I of course will be doing in this video. But that wasn't always the case. An early version of the script from February 2007 explains her childhood in greater detail. In this version, her name was Vera, and she was abused by her father and preyed upon with adult eyes. When he got with another lover, he told Vera that it was because she could never be a real woman, and Vera murdered them both. This caused her to look for love in a father figure, passing herself off as a child even into her adulthood. There are also details about her working the streets for multiple years and catering to wealthy criminals. The closest confirmation of that we get in the movies is this line.
Much of Lena's early life was spent doing whatever she could to survive.
These details could help explain some of her behavior. However, they were never put into the movie, so they're not canon, and Vera does not exist. The original story seems to be inspired by a true crime chronicle known as the Kuřim case, which took place in the small town of Kuřim, Czech Republic in 2007. It involved 3 women who were part of this cult called the Grail movement, who tortured young boys hoping to break their spirits and enslave them for religious purposes. One of the women behind the cult was 33-year-old Barbora Skrylova, who was a classical composer and had a rare glandular disease that made her look like a child. This is probably why Leena in the movie plays the piano and is 33 years old in the original Orphan. 2 of the women, Klara Maurova and her sister, Katarina Maurova, were eventually caught when a neighbor's baby monitor picked up footage of a torture scene and called the police. Klara was using the baby monitor so that she could watch from the other room. Police rescued 2 boys aged 9 and 7 and 1 girl, 13-year-old Anichka Maurova, from the house. But shortly after, Anichka ran away from the facility that she'd been placed in and sent a letter to the Czech police, claiming that her mom had not actually tortured them. Eventually, it was discovered that Anichka didn't actually exist. This was a false identity that the women had created for Barbora. She had been posing as a 13-year-old to get out of charges being filed whenever she got in trouble with the law, which was quite often. She also used the Anichka persona to confuse and manipulate the young boys being tortured. The use of her childlike appearance to elude charges and the psychological manipulation of the kids are both present in the original Orphan, which came out 2 years later in 2009. Leena next appeared in the 2022 prequel, Orphan First Kill, which has got to join the Hall of Fame for the most poorly titled movies, because it does not feature her first kill, and she also doesn't pose as an orphan in it. The entire title is a fucking lie. But to understand how Leena managed to fool countless families, we've got to take it back to her childhood years. That is, her real childhood years. When it comes to Leena, we don't know exactly what went down with her own biological family outside of the clues provided by that early version of the script that I mentioned earlier. But we do know that she becomes obsessed with forming a relationship with an older married father figure. As I talked about in a previous episode, the stereotype of fatherless behavior comes from real research around absent fathers. And the main takeaway is that girls who grew up without a father will sometimes seek male attention to fill that void. They may even seek it directly from a guy who fits their idea of a father figure, which seems to be the case with Leena. It may not always be an absent father that causes this behavior. It could come from any neglect, abuse, or really any unresolved childhood issues. Or it could just be something else, like a desire for stability, money, or just some weird fantasy. But the reason I keep coming back to the childhood trauma theory is because none of the other theories do anything to explain her turning to violent behavior when she doesn't get what she wants. Her first known victims were a family in Estonia, who she tricked into adopting her and failed to seduce the father, killing him, his wife, and 2 kids before burning the house down. Fire would become something of a calling card of hers, allowing her to essentially erase the trail of evidence wherever she goes, allowing her to get a fresh start somewhere without being tracked. This is another behavior that, in my opinion, most likely points to family conflict in her childhood. It was hard to find any clinical research linking childhood trauma or personality disorders to frequently relocating and restarting your life, but to be fair, I already opened this video with sourcing the mayonnaise clinic, so it's not like I need to put any more boring stuff in this video. But just searching the World Wide Web, I don't know why I called it that. I don't normally call it that. I did notice a lot of personal accounts of people with borderline personality disorder seeming to have a pattern of constantly moving and relocating, and many of them seem to reference an abusive childhood. And what I can find clinical research on is the link between childhood abuse and BPD. Leena's behavior does match up pretty well with BPD. Oh no, we're back on the mayonnaise clinic. But I do want to highlight this symptom. A pattern of unstable, intense relationships, such as believing someone is perfect one moment and then suddenly believing the person doesn't care enough or is cruel. Let's remember that as we go through her story, which continues with another stint at the Saarne Institute. The Orphan films are known for their thrilling twists and turns, so in honor of my finally covering this franchise, let me throw you a twist that may shock you. You can play games and receive rewards on your phone with an app called Mistplay. Mistplay is a loyalty app for us gamers. Whether you're looking for a little help covering your horror movie memorabilia, Google Play film purchases, or DoorDash food is fuel deliveries, with Mistplay you can earn rewards simply by discovering and playing mobile games. Mistplay offers a huge catalog of games, including everything from puzzle games, RPGs, strategy, adventure, and more. Here's how it works. You play games and earn points on the Games tab. A few favorites include Call of Duty Warzone Mobile, Doomsday: The Last Survivors, and, for all you banana enthusiasts out there, Age of Apes. Then you head over to the shop, where you can exchange those points for gift cards to some of your favorite brands. How's that for a twist ending? Over $100 million in gift cards have already been redeemed, so visit mistplay.com/CZsWorld or click the link in the description to download Mistplay for free. You'll get 200 bonus points for signing up today. Plus, use my code CZsWorld100 inside the app for an additional 100 free points, which will help towards redeeming your first gift card. During her time at Saarne Institute, Leena was known as one of its most violent patients, fighting against staff and incurring permanent scars from trying to get out of the straitjacket that she was placed in to keep her at bay.
She struggled so hard against her restraints that she would bleed severely.
She covered up her scars with a collar and accessories, wore dentures to hide her deteriorating teeth, and used a wrap to flatten her chest. Growing up, presumably in and out of the institute, she was able to develop some artistic skills, because art therapy was one of the few activities that the inmates were allowed to partake in. She became a very talented painter and pianist. She had a trend of going from family to family, posing as a child, then stealing whatever she could and disappearing. I'm not sure why she was in and out of the institute so much after killing and burning the family of her first victims in Estonia. Maybe burning down the house effectively destroyed the evidence, and she couldn't be charged and held against her will, even if everyone kind of knew that she did it. Or maybe she just has a habit of escaping the mental hospital. In any event, she would get a family to take her in, try to get with the dad, get rejected, rob them blind, rinse and repeat. But in 2005, she escalated to more extreme behavior. Posing as a runaway, she was taken in by a family who had one son and one daughter. They gave her everything she could have needed, but we can only assume she tried to seduce the dad and took their lives when she was unsuccessful. This time, she was caught and permanently submitted to Saarne Institute, where she would spend the next 2 years. I'm just gonna be real with you. There are only 2 Orphan movies so far, and the timeline is already a total mess. I've already taken a lot of artistic liberty to fill in the gaps up to this point to try to make it make sense. For example, in Orphan, we see her last examination at Saarne was February 8th, 2007. But that's clearly impossible, because she escaped for the final time on January 26, 2007, according to several security camera timestamps. Maybe her last examination was really just a review of the tapes that they had of her after her escape.
Make no mistake, Leena may look like a child, but she is a grown woman. 31 to be exact.
No, that's not exact. If you do the math from the date of her birth to the date that we just saw on the security cameras, she's only 30. On the day she escapes, she can be seen drawing quietly in a secure room. She meets Anna, the woman hired to be her new art therapist. During art time, she uses a piece of candy to trigger her fellow inmate, Federica, who apparently has the same mental disorder as that one fish from SpongeBob SquarePants.
Chocolate! Chocolate! Chocolate!
This is part of what I imagine is a long-running experiment that Leena has been running on Federica, essentially training her to attack the hospital staff in exchange for candy, and it's all part of her escape plan. That afternoon, she's watching the 1936 film Poor Little Rich Girl. I'm guessing this is her favorite movie, and Leena uses it as inspiration for her own life. It's about an elementary school-age girl who feels neglected by her father, and after getting separated from her nanny at the train station, takes on a new name and decides to reinvent herself. She's taken in by a duo of performers and becomes a singer, helping propel them to national fame. It's a much more heartwarming version of Leena's pattern of behavior, reinventing herself, getting taken in, and robbing or killing them. Leena also has some kind of relationship with one of the security guards, Dimitri, and convinces him to buy her a set of fabric bracelets and a collar to cover up her scars. That afternoon, they would arrive. She invites him in to reward him. I'm not really sure what this guy's deal is, because within the world of the film, it's pretty much implied over and over that she's not physically attractive to men. So in all likelihood, there is something wrong with Dimitri. Like, we've got a Dimitri 445 situation going on. It does kind of beg the question. If she finally found someone who's interested in her, and he works at this mental hospital, why doesn't she just stay there and not kill him? The answer is likely because he isn't a dad. Leena is only interested if she gets to be a homewrecker, and this probably has something to do with the mystery relationship with her own father. She manages to get his guard down, smash his head into the wall, steal his keycard, and escape, with a little help from Federica in exchange for one last treat.
Do you want some candy?
She hides out in the trunk of the art therapist's car so she can strike her down with a pipe upon arriving home and take advantage of her Wi-Fi to scan a database of missing children until she finds one that resembles her. Just to be clear, her plan is to pretend that she's the slightly more grown-up version of a girl that's been missing since early childhood. She specifically searches for American girls. At first glance, this doesn't make much sense. It would be more believable to go to another Baltic country where her accent wouldn't stand out quite as much. However, she probably just wanted to get as far away from her criminal record in Estonia as possible so that no one would ever recognize her on a wanted poster. The United States is somewhere where it would be easier to find a visual match in terms of skin color, and the accent could be explained as something that was picked up by spending the earlier years of her life in Estonia. The Estonian language is not generally spoken outside of Estonia, and the only other language she knows is English. So by process of elimination, her options are Australia, Canada, Ireland, maybe Malta, New Zealand, United Kingdom, and United States. United States has by far the largest population out of these, so it was her best chance at finding a missing girl that looks like her. And Esther Albright is the perfect match. The now 10-year-old Esther had disappeared 3 years and 8 months before, and Leena more or less matches up with the hypothetical age-progressed photo on the database website. From there, it's as easy as dressing up as a little girl and going to a playground at night where she's discovered by a cop.
Where are your parents?
My parents are in America.
Sweetheart, what is your name?
My name is Esther.
Personally, I think it's a little unbelievable that a family wouldn't notice that this is not actually their Esther. Esther Albright would have been almost 6 years old at her disappearance and 9.5 in 2007. Sure, there's a lot of growing up that happens during that time period, but I feel like it would have been safer if Leena had picked a girl who disappeared at 3 or 4 years old. This would better explain why she looks older and why she now speaks with an accent. In any event, choosing Esther works for reasons that Leena never anticipated. She's transferred to a US embassy in Moscow as the police contact the American authorities in exchange for Esther's mother to come pick her up. She believes she's tricked the mother, Trisha, with her performance, and learns more about the rest of the family on the plane ride to Connecticut. The reunion is very emotional for the dad and pretty cold from the older brother, Gunnar, and it wouldn't be long before she found out why. Leena is mesmerized when she sees the huge house they live in. She's totally hit the jackpot. The next day, she's taken to see a therapist, Dr. Seeger, and claims she's not ready to tell what happened to her yet. She says this because it is believable that the kidnapper trauma would be hard to talk about, and it prevents her from accidentally revealing the lie. However, she does slip up by pretending to remember the doctor's parrot, which is not the same parrot from 4 years ago. She learns this while eavesdropping on Dr. Seeger's post-session meeting with Trisha.
Sydney was a macaw. bright orange and 4 times the size.
Right as the psychologist is getting around to telling Trisha that it felt like a performance, Leena interrupts them by screaming and making up a story about a boy in the waiting room attacking her. I could probably get away with an Amber Heard joke right here, but honestly I don't feel like causing a shitstorm today, so let's just carry on. Leena is further put on edge when she notices a man in the distance photographing her, but seeing as how she's playing the part of a 9-year-old, it wouldn't really fit the character to raise a red flag about this. Back at home, one of Gunnar's friends comes to pick him up, making fun of Leena's appearance and accent as he does so. Actually, he calls her Morticia, which doesn't really make sense because that's the mom from the Addams Family. I think he was thinking of Wednesday Addams, which is closer but still has a different hairstyle. Her reaction is to hit him with a threat using vocabulary you wouldn't expect from a 9-year-old, though she disguises it by dishing it out in her native tongue. It translates to, how about I cut your balls off and feed them to you, you fucking shit stain? This is proof that Leena's anger can get out of her control, which kind of further adds to my borderline personality theory. Another symptom is strong anger and loss of temper. The father, the new object of her affections, Alan Albright, invites her to paint with him in his art studio, and he shows her his signature blacklight gimmick.
I always try to fit so much into one canvas, so I resorted to a hidden layer.
She would later adopt this technique into her own work, perhaps as an homage to how much she really cared about Alan. She later finds a collage she'd been working on to raise awareness about his missing daughter, where she discovers the identity of the man who had snapped the photo of her earlier, a detective named Donnan who had been looking for Esther ever since her disappearance. In the evening, she catches Trisha snooping around in her room, eventually leading her to come across Esther's diary. Leena studies it to learn more about the real Esther, using her newfound tactics on the family that night at dinner. That is, until an unexpected visit from Detective Donnan. She awkwardly excuses herself, aware that if anyone is going to catch her in a lie, it's probably him. Because if he's still investigating a missing persons case 4 years later, he must have made some progress at some point, and chances are that the clues didn't point him towards a Russian kidnapper. And Esther's sudden appearance there would have set off alarm bells. She listens in, learning that he's already spoken to Dr. Seeger, which likely means that he's aware of her slip-up at the office, and possibly already suspects that this is not the real Esther. He proposes a group session, and Leena is so preoccupied with trying to avoid this that she forgets the reason that she got up in the first place.
You forgot to fill your glass.
Thinking it won't be long until she's caught, she steals what she can from the house and quietly steps out into the night, ready to disappear again and start over, just like always. But she's distracted by the violet glow of the blacklight in Alan's studio, and finds herself unable to escape the allure of her new crush. This would create problems for her the following night, when she finds herself overcome with jealousy after seeing the two Albright parents getting intimate, and she rips Trisha's dress in retaliation, which apparently is like the ultimate form of assault in this community because it's happened twice now. Leena is experiencing a unique form of JGS, or jealous girlfriend syndrome, which is initially a term I used to describe Amanda Young in the Saw franchise because she wanted to be the only survivor and get all of Jigsaw's attention. Rule number 1, never try to reason with someone who has this condition. This definition translates almost perfectly to Leena, who wants to be the only one left with her new father and is willing to take a few lives in order to get there. We just need to change the name slightly. Jealous adopted daughter syndrome. Jads. I kinda like that. Jads, that's pretty good. While the two parents go out, Gunnar is left in charge of Esther, but rejects spending time with her in order to throw a party with his friends. Okay, why is it that anytime a teenager's parents go out in a movie, the default response is to just throw a party? Can they not think of anything better to do? Doesn't it get boring just having a party every time someone's parents are gone for a few hours? What a weird cliche. Anyway, when Gunnar tries to usher her away from the party, she becomes hostile, but their standoff is interrupted by another drop-by from Detective Donnan, who Leena witnesses snooping in her room and discovers a vinyl record has been taken. Realizing that he's up to something, she makes it look like she's in the shower and sets off after the irksome investigator. When Leena locates and breaks into Detective Donnan's house, she gets confirmation that he's figured out her secret.
If you're not Esther, who the hell are you?
10 stabs to the back of the neck are her solution to make him forget about that, but his last words inform her that he's not the only one who knows, and Leena would immediately find out who else was wise to her false identity. Esther's mother, Trisha, who promptly finishes Detective Donnan with a gun before turning it towards her, forcing her to spill her story. But she's surprised to discover that Trisha already knew that she wasn't Esther, since Esther wasn't really missing. She was lying at the bottom of a well.
Gunnar, he was always way too rough with her. That night, he just went too far.
She had staged the disappearance to protect her only remaining child, and now she was gonna play along with Esther's charade because it was the only thing that could make her husband happy again. Leena is forced to assist her in dumping the detective down the well. Trisha threatens to ship her back to Estonia in handcuffs if she doesn't comply. She's finally met a family almost just as insane as her. As she sees Trisha and Gunnar conspiring in secret beside the bonfire, she most likely realizes that she's now in a battle of wits. Each of them will try to get rid of the other inconspicuously in order to be left as the last woman standing with Alan. But they also have to work together to prevent anyone from discovering that she's not Esther, and that starts with the appointment with Dr. Seeger. So Trisha spends all of her time before the meeting filling Leena in on stories from Esther's early childhood, in an attempt to make her believe that the earlier mix-up about the parrot was just a memory issue, and not something more sinister. During the session, Dr. Seeger almost seems to be testing her, quizzing her on her past as if she was put up to it by Detective Donnan. However, their practice paid off, and Esther was able to recall specific memories from family vacations. I feel like she kind of went overboard though. Last time the doctor sensed that she was being performative, but in this session it feels like she's being even more performative, reciting the name of the place they stayed and the name of the horses they rode when she was just 6 years old. As an adult, I don't even remember specific details from 4 years ago. In fact, 4 years ago I was visiting Universal Orlando right before everything went down with COVID, and I couldn't tell you the name of the hotel I stayed in or the name of the boat that we took to get to the resort. It actually makes no sense unless she studied journal entries or something the night before the session. But I guess Dr. Seeger didn't think about that stuff. It's enough to trick her, and she gives a positive report. With that threat cleared, there is another on the horizon. The Albrights have relatives visiting who haven't seen Esther in years, so Trisha facilitates a wardrobe update and Leena woos them with her piano skills. When the relatives ask what her plans are now that she's home safe, she turns to Trisha for guidance.
What are my plans, Mommy?
Absolutely nothing. I am not letting you out of my sight.
And there's definitely an underlying meaning here. Trisha will be keeping a close eye on her little prisoner if she knows what's good for her. After she retires to her room, Gunnar is there waiting for her and delivers a speech trying to intimidate her, but she refuses to back down, slapping him in the face. Even after he makes it clear that he doesn't have a problem killing her like his mother does, Leena is defiant. At dinner, Alan announces that he's going to show off his latest work in a gallery and invites Esther to go, but Trisha says that she has other plans for the day. This upsets her, and she takes her dinner upstairs and feeds it to a rat in her vent. Alan comes to check on her shortly after and invites her to join him for some painting in the gallery, but a prying Trisha sees her kiss him on the hand and becomes jealous and territorial.
Are you so utterly delusional to think that he would want you?
She makes a good point. I never understand why Leena wants to try the same plan over and over when it always gets stuck at the same part. The part where she has to make the transition from daughter to girlfriend. Even if she did manage to find a guy to love her, it's never gonna work out coming from it at that angle. She should have stuck with Dmitri. Although I suppose it was only a matter of time before Dmitri got fired for having relations with one of the patients. The two go back and forth with covert shots at one another, including laced macaroni, a dead rat smoothie, and a failed railroad assassination. After Alan's train departs, Leena knows they'll try to kill her, so she steals and races off in the family car, this time really planning to escape. With open roads ahead of her and no more charade to uphold, she uses the tools at hand in the car to craft a more adult image for herself. Lipstick, sunglasses, and even a cigarette. The moment represents her letting go of her loyalty to the family. She no longer needs to wear the mask of a harmless child, and she's symbolically transformed back into the dangerous, volatile woman from the Institute. However, when she's pulled over by a police officer, her new disguise isn't enough to stop her from being recognized as Esther. When the officer returns her back home, Trisha keeps up the mask of a concerned mother, dropping a line about Esther threatening to hurt herself as of late. She's setting the stage so that when the officer makes her report, the idea of Esther committing suicide doesn't seem too out of the question. And she doesn't wait even a moment to, with the help of Gunnar, restrain her with the intention of slitting her wrists with a pair of scissors. One of the often overlooked characteristics of our Estonian exile is that she basically has super strength. She's not out there throwing cars or anything, but she does punch way above her weight. After spitting in Patricia's face, she manages to elbow Gunnar in the rib and get free, and Gunnar is like a fully grown 18-year-old man and fencing champion. It's stated that Leena's disease makes her proportionally the same as a 9-year-old girl, and according to this chart on Proxim Group, an average 9-year-old girl is about 4'4" and 61 pounds, equivalent to 133 centimeters and 28 kilograms. So the fact that a woman that small could take down Gunnar, who is 5'8", 132 pounds, or 173 centimeters and 60 kilograms, doesn't really make sense, and it wouldn't be the last example of her taking down a much larger man. She must have gotten completely jacked fighting with the guards at the Saarne Institute. Gunnar does catch up with her though, but finds himself under-equipped when the woman posing as his little sister pulls a crossbow on him before finishing off the deed with 17 stabs through the chest. It seems like she's getting more and more over the top and indulgent with each kill as she continues to let her psychopathic tendencies take over and her little girl demeanor take a back seat. The only problem for her is that she's not the only crazy woman under this roof. When Trisha sees the mutilated body of the child she had risked everything to protect, she goes full psycho mode.
What have you done?
During the ensuing fight between Trisha and Leena, there is something I want to point out. Trisha is nearly the same size as Gunnar. At one point, Leena once again elbows her into a cabinet and she goes flying. What this reminds me of is Chucky, very small in size and weight, yet weirdly strong. Chucky's strength is later explained to be the result of the voodoo curse that keeps him alive, but in Leena's case, there is no supernatural element. Her condition is the result of hypopituitarism, which limits the production of pituitary hormones. In other words, this condition typically makes people weaker, not stronger. GH, growth hormone, is not always affected in people with this condition, but in Leena's case, it definitely is. That's the whole reason that she looks like a child. When GH is affected, it usually results in decreased muscle mass and strength. So Leena being very strong is definitely an exception. You could say it's just because it's a movie and it doesn't have to be realistic, and you would be correct, but let me pose another consideration. The Orphan franchise as a whole seems to take inspiration from writer-director M. Night Shyamalan, from the disturbing twist endings to the presence of some kind of hidden layer of meaning. Another common theme in Shyamalan films is characters who have a disability but learn to turn it into a strength. Elijah Price from Unbreakable is physically weak, leading him to discovering an intellectual gift. Ivy Walker from The Village is blind, causing her not to fear the monsters the way that sighted people do. Kevin Wendell Crumb from Split has dissociative identity disorder, but it allows him to do great things that no normal human could accomplish.
The broken are the more evolved.
Leena's ability to harness some kind of physical strength despite being limited to essentially a child's body could be a similar example. It's just not clear how she was able to pull it off. Different hypopituitarism patients have different hormones that are affected. Maybe the condition also gave her other properties like high muscle density and neuromuscular efficiency, allowing her to look small but activate a lot of strength. Or more likely, maybe it's just a movie. The struggle between Trisha and Leena leads to a fire being started in the kitchen as their chase continues out onto the roof. But the slippery snow leaves them both dangling from the ledge. Alan returns home while this is all going on and tries to save them, but isn't quick enough to grab his wife's hand. For Leena, it must have been easy to at least hang on. She has high proportional grip strength and not a lot of body weight to hold up, allowing Alan to hoist her to safety. But then he starts caressing her face for some reason and realizes that her teeth are fake, and Leena chooses this, of all moments, as the time she's going to confess her romantic love for him. Ladies, if you're thinking about telling that special guy how you really feel, maybe don't do it 5 seconds after your disgusting fake teeth just fell out, and maybe don't do it the same day that his girl died, you know? He freaks out and calls her a monster, and it's hard to tell, but it looks like she reacts to the name calling and pushes him off the roof, then immediately regrets it, as she watches him join his wife as a sidewalk splat beside their luxury driveway. Finding herself in a familiar situation now in an unfamiliar country, she grabs her stuff and notably changes from the pink collar given to her by her latest mother figure back into her original black collar, symbolizing her quickly moving on from this latest failure to try to manipulate the father of another family. My outfit would probably not be the detail I'd be worried about as the house around me is burning down, but you know, woman moment. I'm kidding. She ends up in the hands of the police and Dr. Seeger, who sends her to an adoption agency.
The family that brought her to America died in a house fire.
Up to this point, she's said to have killed at least 7 people. That is, 7 people that the Saarne Institute knows about. This confused me at first, but I think it makes sense. By my count, there's the original family of 4 in Estonia, then another family of 4 in 2005, then Dimitri, Anna the art therapist, Detective Donnan, Gunnar, Trisha, and Alan. That's 14 kills. It makes sense that Saarne wouldn't know about any of the deaths in America, so that's 10. You could take away the original family. Like I mentioned earlier, there doesn't seem to be any proof that Leena was behind this, even if most people assume that she was. But then that's only 6. I think they may be counting this guard, who was technically killed by the other inmate, Federica, but it was kind of prompted by Leena, so they might be including that in the count. But because Saarne Institute still doesn't know she's in the US, she's placed into a nearby orphanage called St. Mariana Home for Girls. And now that I'm looking at this again, I'm realizing something I may have missed in my Charles Entertainment Cheese video. In the children's book backstory for Charles Entertainment Cheese, they mentioned that he comes from St. Marinera's orphanage. I don't know how common St. Mariana is as a name for an orphanage, but it sure seems like the people that wrote the Chuck E. Cheese children's book just decided to put a parody of a horror movie. Also, her actual backstory seems to kind of get lost in the move.
It's amazing how strong her English is given she's only been in the country a few years.
Have you just forgotten that Esther was originally from America? She never got in trouble at the orphanage, but she was always around when there was trouble.
2 girls get into a fight, there she is. Someone gets caught stealing, there she is again.
At school, she was also in the vicinity when a boy holding a pair of scissors fell and impaled himself through the jaw. Or at least that's how the story goes. She would have turned 33 years old on April 20th, 2009. meaning that her next adoption, which takes place in January as seen on this EKG machine, must have been January 2010. During an open house at the orphanage, she's singing and painting in a room upstairs by herself when a man named John Coleman walks into the room. When she sees him, she already knows he will be the next target of her dangerous affection. Three weeks after dazzling John, and later his wife Kate, Leena, or as she is now permanently known, Esther, is adopted by the Connecticut family. Because no matter what I do, I can't get away from Vera Farmiga characters who live in Connecticut.
We prefer to be known simply as Ed and Lorraine Warren.
They start teaching her sign language on the car ride home so that she'll be able to communicate with her new sister, Max, who is deaf. The couple also has a boy named Daniel. Gotta love her reaction when she first sees the house.
Is this your house?
Now it's your house too.
She totally hit the jackpot, again! During a small party to celebrate her arrival, she's gifted a sign language book and an easel as Daniel plays Surrender by Cheap Trick on Guitar Hero. Don't give yourself away, Esther. She initially gets much closer to the girl, Max, and in the night, she hears John and Kate getting busy in the master bed, and she brings Max to stay in their room, claiming that they're afraid of the thunder.
I want to sleep next to Daddy.
Yes, very subtle. At school, the other students make fun of her for looking like Little Bo Peep. Is this whole charade even worth it if you have to go back to school? Don't answer that. She would later continue to be the subject of bullying, mostly from this girl, Brenda. It's kinda pitiful, actually. Imagine going back to school as an adult and still getting bullied. While playing outside in the snow with Max one day, she witnesses Daniel shoot a pigeon with his paintball gun. He's clearly distraught after seeing what he's done, and she grabs a huge rock and tells him to put the bird out of its misery. When he refuses, she does the job herself.
Pesky bee.
That night, while taking a bath, she gets into a disagreement with Kate over locking the door, fearing that someone will come in and discover her secret. She also notices Kate snooping around her room, which I think serves to tell us that the walls are very thin throughout the house. It's easy to hear activity going on in other rooms. After school one day, Leena asks about a name that she's heard come up a couple times now, and Kate shows her the garden dedicated to her stillborn child, Jessica, which sends a tear down her face. Is this a sign that we've been wrong about her this whole time? Throughout this video, I've referred to her as a psychopath, in addition to her likely case of BPD. She does exhibit many symptoms of psychopathy, like superficial charm, need for stimulation, pathological lying, manipulation, lack of remorse, parasitic lifestyle, criminal behavior, and lack of empathy. But is feeling sad about Kate's miscarriage a sign that she really does have empathy? I think it's unlikely. She knows that she's an extremely talented manipulator. I don't think it's out of the question to assume that if she's able to trick people into believing that she's a 9-year-old, that she would have learned to cry on command at some point. Psychopaths often learn to mimic emotions that they've seen in other people to camouflage themselves and better fit in. For example, take the American Psycho himself, Patrick Bateman, who became obsessed with fitting in with Wall Street social norms. I was going to put another example, but all the ones I came up with contain spoilers for that movie or show, which I think actually kind of proves my point. The fact that the psychopath is indeed a psychopath is always hidden at the beginning of a story and serves as the narrative twist, because most psychos hide their behavior to manipulate others. Esther is no exception.
She would have been lucky. You're a great mommy.
Kate and John get a little extracurricular in the kitchen, and Esther sees them through a microwave reflection. I mean, why would you do that out in the open if you have kids? My first instinct was, would she even still get horny after a hysterectomy? So of course I looked it up. I'm really giving my search bar a workout during this video, apparently. Studies show both positive and negative effects on desire. Some women report decreased desire after a hysterectomy, while others experience no change or even an increase. The study attributes this variation to factors like pre-existing sexual function, age, surgical approach, and psychological factors. But still, why would you bang in the kitchen if you have kids? John notices Esther watching them, and he just seems more mad that they had to stop than anything.
Damn it!
Kate does confront her the next day, but Esther calmly demonstrates that she already knows all about fucking. And that's not the only adult thing she knows about. The next day at the playground, she notices one of the neighbors seemingly kind of flirting with John, which obviously gets under Esther's skin because that's her man. Jads is out in full force right here. Also, this is the most insane playground we've seen on this channel since New Nightmare. This thing looks like a European palace, and just like that playground, it proves to be pretty dangerous when Esther shoves Brenda from her school off a second-story landing and breaks her leg against the slide on the way down. Max sees this go down, but ultimately attests to her new sister's innocence. Esther also prays before dinner, which is not something we saw her do with the Albright family, but whatever. She also proves that she's picked up Max's sign language faster than her brother, who's been around Max's entire life. This causes Daniel to finally snap at her weird behavior.
She's not my fucking sister.
But despite the tense relationship with Daniel, she at least didn't have to feel threatened about her cover being blown. But when the staff of St. Mariana's orphanage comes around again, Leena would take steps to protect her secret. Over the next few days, Leena would begin laying groundwork to get between Kate and John. She tells Kate that John was hitting on the neighbor and takes advantage of the thin walls to learn more about interpersonal wedges that she could jam between them. There's tension because John once cheated on her and Kate did something to endanger one of the kids. The two parents are honestly really immature and not a very good couple in my opinion. They both argue by making accusations about the other rather than trying to fix their issues. But this video is not about them, it's about Esther/Leena. And she'd have plenty of accusations heading her way before long. Sister Abigail from the orphanage visits the house and Esther eavesdrops on the conversation. Sister Abigail shares her concerns about Esther always being in the vicinity of trouble at the orphanage and adds a more serious accusation.
But the most troubling thing is the Sullivan house fire. I checked into it further. It was arson. They have never found the person who did it.
Wait. Who are the Sullivans? You mean the Albrights? Unless you're suggesting that there was another family that Leena torched over the last 2 years. But that would be very suspicious if both of her homes burned down with her as the only survivor. And the orphanage would not know about any of the families from Estonia because they believe that Esther is the Albrights' biological daughter. So I'm just gonna assume she got the name wrong here and she meant to say the Albrights. My god, this timeline is a mess. But Leena knows her secret is in jeopardy now, so with Max's help, veers Sister Abigail off the road and impales her with the sharp end of a hammer. She scares Max into compliance by implying that she'll have to kill anyone who tells on her, as they hide the bloody articles in the treehouse. She notices Daniel secretly watching as they head back inside, so that night she threatens him as well by bringing a box cutter to his neck.
You know what this is for? That's for cutting boxes.
Only this one is more for cutting something else.
If I find out that you're lying, I'll cut your hairless little prick off before you even figure out what it's for.
Kate and John do end up taking her to a psychiatrist where she puts on the act of a perfect little princess, but alludes to tension between herself and Kate, again, part of her plan to get rid of her competition. But as this situation continues to unfold a lot like the previous one, she has a difficult time controlling her anger in private. Police visit the house following the discovery that it was Abigail's last stop before going missing, and Leena honors her previous father figure, Alan, by painting disturbing images into all of her paintings when viewed from under the glow of the blacklight in her fish tank. These seem to be depictions of her various crimes, seemingly combined with fantasies of things that she wants to do, like torture and set fire to the occupants of Saarne Institute. Under the pictures, there's a graphic mural on the wall of what appears to be John and Kate in the kitchen, which she's mutilated with her blacklight paint. Clearly, Kate has become part of the fantasy. But her violent desires are kept secret from John, for now. She delights at the idea of spending more time with him one morning after talking her way out of a dental appointment, something she probably wanted to avoid in order to prevent her fake teeth from being discovered again, seeing as how that went over last time. She continues her efforts to make Kate look like the bad guy.
I don't think Mommy likes me very much.
He suggests trying to do something nice for her, so Esther picks some flowers out of the garden dedicated to Jessica. Kate takes the bait and totally freaks, making it look as if she'd hurt Esther by grabbing her arm. Then, in her most calculated move yet, she sneaks into the garage and uses a bench vise to actually break her forearm. She proceeds to go back to bed and then she calls for her daddy, and he assumes that Kate was the one to break her arm, so he drives her to the hospital. I'm unsure how the hospital staff managed to put her in a cast without seeing the scars on her wrist and mentioning something about it to John. Maybe the bruising from her broken arm made the scars less noticeable? Yeah, let's go with that. Honestly, it seems pretty risky to go to the hospital. I feel like doctors might be more likely to notice that she's actually an adult. All of this just goes to show that she's probably dealing with the poor impulse control that often comes with BPD. When they get back, Kate is sent away to sleep on the couch while Esther gets to stay in the bed with John. I mean, I'm trying to see things from her perspective, but it's hard to even imagine how down bad I would have to be to break my arm in order to try to get with a girl. After all, these are the arms that I use for writing and editing videos. Esther is right-handed, so she didn't break her painting arm, but she does need both to play the piano. She continues her assault on Kate's reputation by cutting a hole in Daniel's backpack. And when Kate gets out of the car to help her son pick up his books before school, Esther sneaks into the front seat and puts the car into neutral, causing it to roll back like King Dakar on a windy day. Unlike Ka, the car crashes into the snow. I'm honestly not a huge fan of this plan because how did Esther know that the backpack would split right when it did, before Daniel had gone into the school? I mean, why didn't it break when he picked it up in the car? I guess maybe it was just like a spur of the moment thing, like she was just sabotaging the backpack to be a bitch to Daniel, but then when she saw the opportunity, she decided, you know what, it's rewind time, everybody. This incident, combined with the discovery of a wine bottle, prompts John and the family psychiatrist to check Kate into rehab. Apparently the sessions with the psychiatrist just happen in the living room of their house where any of the kids can listen in. Esther threatens to shoot Kate if Max says anything. Or, she can't say anything, but if she signs anything. But that night, she overhears Daniel and Max conspiring to tell the adults the truth about her violent actions. Literally everything that goes on in this house, Esther seems to be aware of. The real villain in this movie is poor acoustics. And she gets even more information she can weaponize after discovering Kate's diary, and she would use it to force Kate to make like her left arm and reach a breaking point. With Kate pretty much having concluded that Esther is a danger to the family, she plans to take the kids and escape in the middle of the night. But Esther seems to already be aware of her plan and waits up in Max's room, setting up a tense confrontation. She gets candid about her motivation for destroying Kate's life.
Kate, it's too late. It's your own fault. You took your family for granted.
The next day is the 23rd of January, and Esther, who is somehow always in the right place at the right time, catches Daniel rummaging through the secret area in the treehouse where Sister Abigail's bloody articles are hidden. As usual, she's a step ahead of her enemy. She burns the evidence, then squirts the lighter fluid in his direction, setting the whole treehouse ablaze and locking Daniel inside to die. Obviously, this is her preferred method of getting rid of evidence, as this is the 4th time she's resorted to this tactic. But I have to think this would be an easy way for her to get caught. She already knows that the people at the orphanage were suspicious of the last fire, so having another person die in a fire would certainly be looked into. Add that to the fact that this is a treehouse that isn't connected to any electrical wiring, and it's pretty suspicious for it to suddenly burst into flames in the middle of winter, with Daniel locked in it. He manages to climb out the window, but when the structure collapses, he hits the ground hard and goes unconscious. Daniel finds himself in the position of the wounded bird from before, and Esther grabs a rock to try to finish him off with. But before she can HM6 him into the afterlife, she's pushed by Max, who shows up to defend her brother. Before things can escalate any further, Kate gets there to tend to Daniel, and Esther is forced to stand down. At the hospital, she learns that Daniel is in serious condition with a neck injury, but is stable in the intensive care unit.
Can I have $1 for the soda machine?
Your mother wants you to stay right there.
Good call, Grandma. Glad somebody has common sense in this family. Wait, no, what are you doing?
There you go. Don't be too long.
No, Grandma! You gotta be kidding me. She goes to Daniel's room to finish him off with a pillow, and she successfully flatlines him. But doctors are able to revive him because she puts the pulse oximeter back on him. I'm not sure why she does this, but she does more or less get the desired effect when Kate finally loses it and bitch slaps her in the face. Which, deserved, but she also got what she wanted, and the orderlies restrain Kate and sedate her. Can they just do that when she's not even a patient? Apparently at this hospital, they can, and Kate becomes an overnight guest at the psych ward while John, Esther, and Max are taken home. With Kate out of the picture for the time being, Leena sees it as the perfect time to make her move. She fashions herself in a black dress that is much more revealing than anything she's worn up to this point. She also puts on makeup, sets up the master bedroom for romance with candles and roses, and prepares a charcuterie board for John, who is getting drunk on the couch. She's wearing the lipstick again, just like she did when stealing the Albrights' car a few years earlier. It seems to be her go-to to make herself feel older. This, understandably, kinda freaks him out, and he orders her to go to her room as a reminder that he's the parent and she's just supposed to be the child. He even threatens to call the orphanage and send her back because he's overwhelmed by the stress, and this breaks Esther's heart. She's reached that unavoidable point in the Leena Klammer cycle where it's time to get revenge. She notices Kate calling the house, so she completely cuts the power. Which, it's 2010. I don't know why Kate's first move is calling the house. Just call his cell, are you kidding me? As John searches around with the flashlight, Esther sneaks up behind him and stabs him in the back with a steak knife. Honestly, John is an idiot too. He should have gone directly to Max's room and protected her after discovering that Esther had gone insane. She proceeds to stab him several times in the chest. And this is that other example that I alluded to earlier of Leena basically appearing to have super strength. She's able to push him to the ground where he's unable to throw her off of him. Even if she is 33, a grown man should be stronger than a literal tiny woman. Maybe the blood loss from the first stab made him weak and the alcohol made him woozy, allowing her to throw him off balance. Max sees this crime of passion from the top of the stairs and runs away, but instead of chasing her, Esther heads to the safe where the family keeps a gun. The way she operates honestly makes no sense to me. You didn't need the gun for the dad, but you're gonna need it for the little girl and the mom? Speaking of whom, Kate comes crashing through the wall, which I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and assume that this happens because she's in a panic and not because she doesn't know how to drive in the snow. Esther hides and later shoots her through a frosted window while Kate is investigating upstairs. She searches the house for her wounded victim, eventually finding her on the ceiling of the greenhouse. Esther gives priority to hunting down Max, for some reason, and Kate uses the opportunity to crash through the window pane that she's standing on and basically body slam her infant-pilled Estonian house guest out cold and retrieve the gun. But when police arrive moments later, she's disappeared, not showing herself again until she rushes at Kate and Max with a knife, managing to knock her down to the frozen pond where her tirade continues. There must be some symbolism going on here, with the final battle taking place in the greenhouse where the memorial to Jessica is, and the pond where Max nearly drowned and lost her hearing. Max recovers the dropped gun and tries to shoot Esther, but misses and makes a crack in the ice, which both women fall into. Esther does everything she can to try to pull Kate back down, but when that doesn't work, she brings out the old sympathy card.
Please, don't let me die, Mommy.
I'm not your Kate Mommy!
Deserved. Seemingly knocked out, Esther can be seen sinking to the bottom of the pond, and that's the last we see of her. Presumably, the fake daughter died where the real one had survived. But I guess they're used to swimming in freezing cold temperatures in the Baltic. Who knows if her survival instincts could have kicked in one more time and given her a shot of adrenaline needed to get back to the surface. I've always thought this final shot of the pond was kind of ominous and inconclusive. Could Leena come back, change her identity again, and go after yet another new family? The possibility seems likely. The story of the Orphan franchise is certainly an unconventional one, with the prequel, Orphan First Kill, coming out 13 years after the original. The actress, Isabelle Fuhrman, is actually twice the age for a story set 3 years earlier. I just want to talk about this moment I had while making this video. I was starting up work at the beginning of a Tuesday, just taking my notes on the movie, and I'd left off right here, 34:20 in First Kill. And seeing this image while my brain was still going from eating breakfast mode to watching a movie mode, I just started laughing because it's clearly an adult. Like, how stupid would these characters have to be not to see that? And then I just started imagining the other civilians in their town just seeing this adult woman walking around holding hands with this other, much shorter adult woman dressed to look like her missing daughter, and just thinking, wow, I really feel sorry for Trisha, but this is kinda sus. And it's just obvious to everyone around them, but in social situations, nobody knows what to say because they don't want to shatter the illusion and make her upset, so it's just constantly awkward. As I've discussed throughout this video, this has gotta be one of the most plot hole riddled series that I've ever talked about on my channel. For example, when Leena first comes home to the Albrights before we learn that the real Esther is dead, there's some foreshadowing about the plot twist. Some of it makes sense, like Trisha dropping hints so that Leena doesn't give herself away.
Do you think Father will recognize me?
Maybe not if you keep calling him Father.
Dad.
Yeah, that's better.
And fixing her up to look more like Esther before meeting the dad, then saying that she's nervous about said meeting.
I think I'm nervous.
These are all fun details to look back at once we know that Trisha doesn't really believe that this is her Esther. But then there are details that are inconsistent with that. Trisha looks genuinely confused when Leena doesn't remember that the grandmother passed away, and she also says things that will deliberately confuse her.
Plan is, tomorrow you're gonna talk to Dr. Seeger. Do you remember her? She had the parrot named Sydney.
Why would you say that? You're just setting her up to make a mistake. The original Orphan has similar issues. Again, there are good moments, like Esther hinting that she's learned to paint because she had plenty of time to practice, but then there are things that are illogical, like her telling them that she already knows about fucking after catching them in the act. She takes such great lengths to maintain the illusion that she's a child, so why doesn't she just pretend that she doesn't know about sex yet? And the thing with the treehouse is ridiculous. Even if everything had gone according to plan, this still probably would have gotten her caught. The continuity between the two films is pretty rough, and oftentimes it feels like when First Kill was made, they were aware of the first movie and probably saw it when it came out, but didn't really go back to watch it. Hopefully this video can serve as a guide as to what the timeline should look like going forward, because in September 2023, First Kill director William Brent Bell told The Hollywood Reporter that a third Orphan movie was in active development. So yeah, while I do have my issues with both Orphan and Orphan First Kill, I actually think Leena, or Esther if you want to call her that, is actually a pretty cool character. With the exception of Chucky, which is really very different in tone, there isn't really another character like this in the horror genre, an adult villain playing the part of a child. The blacklight paintings with a hidden layer of meaning are the perfect analogy for this dynamic. Things are not always as they seem on the surface. There are also themes of an adult stuck in this cycle of childhood, the Leena cycle as I put it earlier. These ideas have aged pretty nicely and accidentally make a social commentary on this phenomenon of millennial infantilization. And yes, I acknowledge that Leena is technically not a millennial, she's actually part of Generation X, but it's more about the core audience for these movies being millennial. If you Google millennial infantilization, you'll see several articles critiquing the refusal or maybe inability of Generation Y to grow up and mature into adults. There seem to be two sides to this from what I can see, the practical side and the pop culture side. And to be honest, they may both be connected. On the practical side, you see many younger people unable to get a start on life and become independent after high school or college the way that previous generations did, because of factors only partially in their control. Rising population density and inflation have made it much more difficult for millennials to break into the housing market, and they typically have less money to spend thanks to disruptions in the economy.
Well, I think it's important to remember where millennials started and where a lot of their careers began, which is kind of right in the aftermath of the Great Recession. So that hurt their job prospects early on. We saw those impacts linger for a decade.
And that clip actually makes me realize that millennials are older than I thought, because I was only in middle school when the recession began. I was not beginning my career, which kind of proves my point the same way that being unable to find a second example of a psychopath without spoiling any movies proved my point earlier in this video. I literally see millennials as being younger than they actually are. And you pair that with the fact that millennials and Gen Z are getting married later in life, or not at all, due to financial strain, the dissolution of traditional social settings, and cities built for cars instead of people, and you end up with a lot of adults living with their parents well into adulthood. Like Leena, people are choosing to live at home, and in many ways, being in that living situation seems to hinder their ability to grow up. In Leena's case, she tries to approach adult benchmarks such as relationships from a child's perspective, trying to get each of her adoptive fathers to love her, something that's never going to work. She would be better off dressing as an adult and being a productive member of society, but she can't bring herself to do that. It's almost as if she sees herself as a child. And it seems like the same can be said for many millennials.
People don't really have an issue with parents going to Disneyland with their kids, but when an adult who doesn't have kids goes to Disney like every week, they dress up for it, they have Disney memorabilia, and their whole life revolves around Disney, that's what people seem to have a problem with. And obviously, the main group of people who are Disney adults are millennials. And you know what? Especially in like the last year or two, the hate towards millennials has been pretty gnarly. Deserved though.
True. Deserved. It goes beyond just Disney adults though. You've got top blockbusters being based on children's toys. You've got the most successful eating establishments serving glorified candy. You've even got a whole universal basic income movement. Grown people marching the streets because daddy wouldn't give them allowance. And on top of that, SpongeBob memes have become a universal form of communication. It probably goes a little deeper than just a whole generation refusing to take responsibility for themselves and basking in the comforts of childhood nostalgia, even though that definitely is a part of it. For Leena and society at large, there are other factors at play. So what other explanations are there for Generation Y to be forever stunted in a childlike mindset? I think the millennials were probably the first generation to be exposed to a barrage of children's programming with so much money behind it, because companies were realizing that investing in advertising to kids could essentially create customers for life. Just to be clear, I'm not encouraging using that as an excuse to play video games instead of getting a job. Ultimately, your choices are what dictates your life. Another potential reason is that the internet makes access to childhood nostalgia easier than ever. The other day, I just put on a 24-hour Toonami broadcast and basically used it as white noise as I fell asleep.
On the last episode of Dragon Ball Z.
Now, I don't consider myself to be as infantilized as the average millennial, but sometimes it's just kind of nice to listen to some Super Saiyans battle it out and remember back to times when I didn't have serious responsibilities. And in the case of Leena Klammer, she's taking that to the extreme. Her entire life revolves around being a kid, looking like a kid, being cared for by a family, participating in childish activities, and protecting that fantasy world at all costs, even when it continually causes her to self-destruct. When she doesn't get what she wants, she pouts, throws it all away, and starts over. Sound familiar?
I want Szechuan sauce. Where's my Szechuan sauce?
I think there's also a link between Leena and the younger generations and the idea of throwaway culture and wastefulness. Being forced to live in a society of single-use items seemingly translates to relationships. More and more, you see shallow relationships in great quantities. Like those people, Leena is never afraid to just move on to the next thing. I could probably keep going on about this, but I'm gonna cut it off there. Like I said, the whole millennial infantilization thing started around 2008 or 2009. Orphan came out in 2009, so any parallels are really just coincidence. And also, before anyone calls me out, I'm not above liking childlike things. I find immature humor very funny.
Unless you want me to go off to Dallas by myself.
Dallas, Salad.
and I have gone to Disney as an adult, being an enthusiast of coasters and themed attractions, and Pixar. And I even have tickets to a festival called When We Were Young. I'm certainly not immune to anything that was mentioned here today. But I'm also not defined by my more juvenile interests like Leena is. And that's what's interesting to me about her character and what I'd like to see explored more in Orphan 3. Going through childhood over and over like that, constantly starting over with new families and beginning the 4th grade time after time. What does that do to a person? At what point does the cycle break? But maybe it already has broken, and the next installment won't feature Leena at all, but instead feature one of her biggest fans. Way back in the intro, I mentioned how Leena's case closely resembles the real-life Kuřim case of 2007. Well, a few years later, the Orphan movie itself seemed to inspire another true crime case.
A child from Ukraine who's adopted by a married couple here in the US. What happens after that to make your head burst into flame?
Is this a child or a grown woman?
Natalia Grace Gava was a girl allegedly born in Ukraine in 2003. She was born with a rare bone growth disorder, so she was adopted by an American couple, Michael and Christine Barnett, in 2010, when she was 7 years old. But just 2 years later, they claimed that Natalia was actually older than she was claiming to be, and petitioned to have her age legally changed to 22, then abandoned her. They moved to Canada, leaving Natalia alone in their Indiana apartment. They were later put on trial for neglect of a dependent, and the Barnetts claimed that she was trying to hide the fact that she was an adult in an attempt to ruin their lives.
She's got a monthly cycle, and she's hiding it. She had spent every waking day attempting to ruin everybody else's life in the house. She's threatening to kill us. She's trying to kill us.
However, there appears to be evidence that Natalia really was born in 2003, and she really was left alone at just 9 years old. According to In Touch Weekly, investigators visited Ukraine to find Natalia Grace's biological mother, Anna Volodymyrivna Gava, in 2019. A DNA test determined that Anna and Natalia were a 99.999% match. The biological mother would have only been 10 years old in 1989, making it very unlikely that she would have given birth to Natalia yet. Most girls don't start ovulating until they're 12 years old. There are also birth and hospital records from 2003 that support Natalia's original age. In 2010, she was examined by an endocrinologist who estimated her age to be 9 to 11 years old, and dental records from 2011 show that she still had 12 baby teeth. But even with all of that, the adopting couple was exonerated due to, in what my opinion appears to be a strange technicality. As Ron Wilkins of the Lafayette Journal and Courier wrote, the judge's August 14 ruling is that the Tippecanoe Superior Court cannot alter another state superior court. So Natalia's age is a settled matter in courts. So from my understanding, because her age was changed in Marion County, Indiana, and the alleged child neglect took place in Tippecanoe County, Indiana, the Tippecanoe court cannot challenge the ruling on her age, even if there's evidence to suggest that Natalia was probably born in 2003. Many people believe that the Barnett couple was inspired by the character of Leena Klammer from the Orphan movie, and thought they could use a similar story to get rid of their responsibility to take care of a child with medical issues. Their claims of psychopathic behavior in Natalia line up with details of Leena's life that we've gone over in this video. But Natalia's new family, the Mans family, hasn't seen any evidence of her being psychotic.
I mean, she's painted you as an evil sociopath. Some evil dwarf is gonna pop up and poison their coffee or stab them in their sleep or whatever. But if that's true, I guess they brought out the worst in you, because you certainly haven't tried to murder you two.
Obviously, it's impossible to read the minds of Michael and Christine Barnett, so we'll never know the true reason that they wanted to adopt and get rid of Natalia.
There's been a page torn from Hollywood here with this movie, The Orphan.
Actually, it's just called Orphan, but nice try, Dr. Phil.
This Russian woman, right next door to Ukraine, is 30 years old, pretends to be a teen.
Actually, she's 33 years old and pretends to be a 9-year-old, but nice try, Dr. Phil.
Gets adopted by a family, comes in, terrorizes them, creates all this havoc. And here we've got this individual from the Ukraine that has been said to be as much as 33, comes in, terrorizes his family, and you've been thrust into that drama. And if Christine has made all of this up, she wasn't very creative. She tore it from this movie.
I mean, I guess we'll find out for sure if 80 years from now, Natalia is legally 115 years old and still alive. As of writing, there's a documentary about Natalia's story which just aired in January 2024, and the allegedly true-to-life story is full of twists and turns that would feel right at home in the Orphan franchise. I currently don't know if the fictional character, Leena Klammer, survived being kicked into that frozen pond. If she died and became a posthumous media sensation, I could see a similar thing happening in that world. A new orphan whose actual age is called into question, going up against a family claiming that the child that they adopted is the second coming of Leena. Or, if Leena survived, I could see her coming out of hiding to go after a couple who used her story for personal gain. Of course, the biggest difference between the Barnett side of the story and the fictional Leena is that Leena has this sort of Electra complex, and lusts after any father figure she can get her tiny little hands on. Obviously, this hasn't worked out for her, but ever since I did that villains who were kind of right video, I've been thinking about what these villains could do to try to accomplish their goals in a more morally ethical way. And for Leena, I have the perfect idea. Why doesn't she just go after pedos? Not only would she be getting what she wants and feel loved, but she'd be taking a pedo off the streets essentially. Like there would be one less of them out there. Or she could always go the route of baiting and killing them so that the ones that act on their impulses get what's coming to them. The pedo hunter, if you will. Seeing as how Mama Max isn't really getting the job done these days. Check out that playlist on the left for more horror history, and remember to subscribe to CZ's World for new horrors every week, ring the death bell for all notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.